Welcome to a new episode of English Plus Podcast, and this is the second episode for this week's theme, Into the World of Urban Legends. In our last episode, we explored the architecture of belief. We asked why our brains are so susceptible to a well-told, chilling story. We looked inward at the cognitive biases and emotional triggers that make urban legends stick. Today, we're turning our gaze outward. We're going on a trip around the world, but we'll only need one story to be our guide. Now picture this scene. A lonely road at night, rain streaking across the windshield. A solitary driver cuts through the darkness. Up ahead, a figure appears, caught in the sweep of the headlights. A lone traveler looking for a ride. The driver pulls over. The stranger gets in. A short, cryptic conversation follows. They arrive at the destination, but when the driver turns to say goodbye, the passenger is gone, vanished into thin air. This is the Phantom Hitchhiker. You know this story, or at least you think you do. Because while the bones of this tale are universally familiar, the face it wears changes with the landscape. In Hawaii, she might be a goddess on her way to the volcano. In Mexico, she might be a weeping spirit searching for her lost children. In Japan, she might be a ghost tethered to the site of her own tragic death. This is the great mystery we're tackling in this episode of Into the World of Urban Legends, the global ghost. One story, many faces. We're following the spectral footprints of a single legend as it crosses borders, oceans, and generations. And as we travel, we'll be asking some burning questions. How can one story manifest in so many different places at once? Is it a case of cultural telephone, with a single tale spreading and mutating over time? Or do these stories spring up independently, born from a universal human experience? And what do the local variations, the specific landmarks, the character's identity, the moral of the story, reveal about the societies that tell them? How does a legend become a cultural Rorschach test, reflecting a community's unique history, its deepest anxieties, and its most sacred beliefs? And finally, what is the true identity of this global ghost? Is it a warning, a deity, a restless spirit, or something more profound? An archetype that speaks to our fundamental relationship with the road, the stranger, and the unknown. Well, this episode, my friends, is your passport to the world of comparative folklore. We'll see how a simple narrative can act as a vessel, filled with the distinct cultural flavors of every place it visits. But remember, this is just a guided tour, not an exhaustive encyclopedia. The true richness of this topic lies in the countless local variations we won't have time to explore in one episode. I'm just providing the map and the compass. The deeper discoveries await those who are curious enough to continue the journey on their own, to seek out the local storytellers and the dusty library books. This is where true knowledge is found, not in the easy summary, but in the dedicated exploration. So buckle up, my friends, our strange and spectral passenger is waiting. It's time to hit the road and chase down a ghost that seems to be everywhere at once. We're going to start with today's episode, The Global Ghost. One story, many faces. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Into the World of Urban Legends. I'm your host, Danny, and last time we asked why we believe. Today, we ask how these beliefs travel. How does a story born in one place find a home in another? And how does it change its clothes to fit in with the locals? Now, to answer that, we're going to become folkloric detectives, tracking one of the most famous and widespread legends of all time, the Vanishing Hitchhiker. Now, let's begin with a baseline. A classic American rendition. A man is driving late at night along a winding country road. It's the anniversary of his daughter's death, and he's feeling melancholy. He sees a young woman in a white party dress standing by the side of the road. Worried for her safety, he pulls over and offers her a ride. She quietly accepts, giving him an address a few miles down the road. She's cold, so he lends her his jacket. When he pulls up to the house, he turns to speak to her, but she's gone. Confused and concerned, he knocked on the door. An elderly man answers. The driver explains what happened, and the man's face grows sad. "You're not the first," he says. "That was my daughter. She was killed in a car crash on this road on this very night 10 years ago. Every year she tries to come home." The driver, shaken, walks back to his car. As he gets in, he glances at the cemetery next to the house. There, draped over a tombstone bearing the young woman's name, is his jacket. It's a poignant, chilling, and beautifully constructed narrative. It has all the core elements, the DNA of the legend. A kind but lonely driver, a mysterious passenger, a specific destination, the sudden disappearance, and the final, shocking revelation that confirms the supernatural encounter, often with a physical object left behind, what folklorists call a retrospective token. This story feels like a product of the 20th century, a ghost story for the age of the automobile, and in many ways it is. It taps into our modern anxieties about the open road, the isolation of the driver, and the potential danger or strangeness of the strangers we might encounter. But if you think this story began with the invention of the Ford Model T, you'd be mistaken. Its lineage is far, far older. Folklorists have found versions of this tale from the horse and buggy days in the 19th century. And if you go back even further, you can find similar narrative structures in religious texts. In the New Testament's Act of the Apostles, Philip the Evangelist is told by an angel to go down a desert road, where he encounters an Ethiopian eunuch in a chariot. Philip explains a passage of scripture to him, baptizes him, and then is suddenly snatched away by the Spirit of the Lord, leaving the eunuch to go on his way rejoicing. The details are different, of course, but the structure is there. A traveler encounters a mysterious stranger on the road, a message is delivered, and the stranger vanishes. This tells us something profound. The Vanishing Hitchhiker isn't just one story. It's an archetype. It's a narrative pattern so fundamental that it can accommodate ghosts, angels, gods, and demons. It's a blank slate, a vessel waiting to be filled by the beliefs and fear of the culture telling it. So let's begin our world tour. Our first stop, the volcanic islands of Hawaii. On the roads that wind around the Kilauea volcano on the Big Island, locals and tourists alike tell stories of picking up a mysterious hitchhiker. Sometimes she's a beautiful young woman, sometimes an old woman with a small white dog. She asks for a ride, but she never speaks. She simply points. If the driver is kind and grants her the ride, they are blessed with good fortune. If they refused, they are said to suffer misfortune like car trouble, accidents, or even worse. And when the car passes the edge of the Helma Mama crater, the passenger vanishes. This is no ordinary ghost. This is said to be Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of volcanoes and fire. Here, the legend completely transforms. It's not a story about a restless spirit or a tragic accident. It's a test of character administered by a powerful deity. The story serves as a powerful piece of cultural instruction. Respect the land, respect the gods, and show compassion, or face the consequences. The benevolent driver is rewarded, but the selfish one is punished. The legend morphs from a ghost story into a living piece of religious folklore, a reminder that the gods of the island are still very much present and watching. The anxiety isn't about ghosts, it's about piety and respect. And now let's travel across the Pacific to Japan. In Japanese folklore, ghosts, known as Yūrei, are often tied to the place of their death, especially if their death was sudden, violent, or they have unfinished business. So naturally, the Vanishing Hitchhiker finds fertile ground here. Many versions are tied to specific, dangerous stretches of road or sharp curves known for fatal accidents. A driver will pick up a passenger who is soaking wet even on a clear night. The passenger asks to be taken to a particular spot and upon arrival, vanishes. The driver later learns that this is the exact spot where someone drowned or crashed their car years ago. The emotional tone here is different from the Pele legend. It's not a divine test. It's a story steeped in sorrow and the Buddhist concept of spirits being unable to move on. The ghost isn't malevolent. It's simply lost, reenacting its final moments tethered to its tragedy. The story serves as a memorial, a way of keeping the memory of the dead alive and acknowledging the lingering spiritual energy of a place marked by trauma. It's also a direct cautionary tale. Slow down on this curve. Be careful on this road. People have died here. The legend becomes a form of supernatural traffic sign. Now let's cross the globe to Latin America, where our hitchhiker often takes on a much more terrifying form. Throughout Mexico and the American Southwest, you'll hear tales that blend the Vanishing Hitchhiker with one of the most famous figures in Latin American folklore, La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. As the legend goes, a woman named Maria drowned her children in a jealous rage after her husband left her for another woman. Realizing what she had done, she then drowned herself. Now her spirit is condemned to wander the earth for eternity, weeping and searching for her lost children along the banks of rivers. In the modern automotive version, a driver might pick up a beautiful, sorrowful woman in white by the side of a road, often near a river or a bridge. She weeps inconsolably. The driver tries to comfort her, but her grief is overwhelming. Sometimes she lets out a blood-curdling scream, "Ay, mis hijos," or "Oh, my children," before vanishing from the car, leaving the driver terrified. Here, the hitchhiker is not a benevolent goddess or a tragic victim of an accident. She is a figure of eternal punishment and a terrifying omen. La Llorona is a complex cultural figure. She is both a monster and a victim, a symbol of motherhood, grief, and betrayal. As a hitchhiker, she becomes a potent moral warning. She is the embodiment of transgression, a cautionary figure warning against jealousy, rage, and the betrayal of familial duty. The story reflects deep-seated cultural anxieties about sin, eternal damnation, and the sacredness of motherhood. The driver who encounters her isn't being tested, they are bearing witness to a soul in perpetual torment. And now, let's move on to our final major stop, and this is Europe, especially the United Kingdom, where the legends often become hyper-localized and tied to documented real-world events. Perhaps the most famous British variant is the Phantom Hitchhiker of Bluebell Hill in Kent. On a specific stretch of the A229 road, there have been numerous reports since the 1960s of drivers hitting a young woman who runs out into the road, only for her body to vanish when they get out to check. Other drivers report picking up a young woman who makes small talk before quietly vanishing from the moving car. And what makes this version so compelling is that it's tied to a real horrific car crash that happened on November the 19th, 1965. A bride-to-be was killed along with two other women on the eve of her wedding. The ghost is widely believed to be her. The legend has become so intertwined with a real-world tragedy that it's nearly impossible to separate fact from folklore. Dozens of official-sounding reports, eyewitness accounts to the police, and journalistic investigations have given the story a veneer of credibility that other versions lack. Now, this reflects a more modern, Western anxiety, the fear of random, meaningless tragedy. The Bluebell Hill Hitchhiker is not a goddess or a moral fable. She is the ghost of a real person whose life was cut short by the brutal randomness of a car crash. The story is an attempt to impose a narrative, a meaning, on a meaningless event. It's a way for a community to process and memorialize a local trauma, transforming a tragic statistic into an enduring supernatural presence. It speaks to our deep-seated need to believe that consciousness doesn't just end, especially when it ends so senselessly. So, what have we learned on our ghost hunting road trip? Now, we've seen one story, one archetype, wear at least 4 completely different masks. In Hawaii, it's a religious parable about respecting the gods, Pele. In Japan, it's a sorrowful ghost story about honoring the dead and acknowledging trauma, Yūrei. In Latin America, it's a terrifying moral cautionary tale about sin and transgression, Llorona. And in the UK, it's a modern tragedy about memorializing the victims of random accidents, Bluebell Hill. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is a cultural chameleon. It's a global ghost precisely because it is so adaptable. The core narrative is just a skeleton. Each culture fleshes it out with its own beliefs, its own history, its own landmarks, and its own anxieties. The story becomes a mirror reflecting what is most important to the people who tell it. So, is the story spreading from one culture to another? In the modern interconnected world, certainly. But the existence of ancient proto-versions suggests something deeper is at play. The road is a powerful liminal space, a place that is neither here nor there. The traveler is in a state of transition. The stranger is the embodiment of the unknown. These are universal human concepts. It's possible, even likely, that these stories don't just travel. They erupt spontaneously and independently from the same universal human consciousness, only to be shaped by local conditions. So, the next time you hear a story about a phantom hitchhiker, don't just ask yourself if it's true. Ask yourself, who is this ghost for them? What does it represent? What is this community afraid of? What do they cherish? And what do they feel the need to warn their children about in the dead of night? Because in answering those questions, you'll find that the legend isn't really about the ghost at all. It's about the people who keep seeing it. Well, my friends, that's what I wanted to talk to you about today in our second episode from this week's theme, Into the World of Urban Legends. Next time on Into the World of Urban Legends, we're coming back home to look at the stories we tell about the things we buy, eat, and use every day. We're diving into the world of contamination legends, from rats in soda bottles to spiders in bubblegum. It's a world that reveals our deepest fears about the anonymous corporate world we live in. So, don't forget to drive safe and maybe think twice before you pick up a stranger on a dark and stormy night. Well, it's up to you. But of course, it's not the end of our episode. We still have the Focus on Language section. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Well, my friends, this is the end of the free version of the episode. If you want to listen to the entire episode and unlock access to all our back catalog and a lot of other rich and useful content, including our series, you can do that by subscribing to Apple Podcasts or Patreon. You can find the links in the description of the episode. But with that being said, thank you very much for listening to the topic today, and I hope you subscribe and join me in the Focus on Language section later. I'll see you next time.